Our first session today is with Nicholas Bloom, a professor of economics at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Nick has been working from home for 20 years. Nick conducted some of the seminal management research about remote work, and he remains at the forefront of the research into hybrid models that companies are adopting, where employees split their time between remote and in-office work. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Yeah, I have been working this for a long time, and it was kind of pretty quiet until March 2020, in which case life on working from home exploded. So why don't I share my screen? I'll talk for kind of 10, 15 minutes and then move to Q&A. So I'm going to talk about how hybrid working from home works out. So before I start, what's my background on working from home? Why should you, why do I know what, have any knowledge about this at all? As Kevin mentioned, I've been working on this, weirdly enough, for almost 20 years. It was like until March 2020, a total background, backwater, I should say, topic. I'm intrigued to see what GitHub has to say, actually, because they're one of the pioneers on fully remote working from, pre-pandemic. In terms of during the pandemic, I've been running a monthly survey of 5,000 US adults, actually a similar survey in the UK of 2,500. I'm not going to talk about it, but the results look similar. We've been serving around 1,000 firms a month. And then I've been discussing and talking with hundreds of organizations. And, I put some of the stuff I've been working on before and during, I got to work on the presidential task force on the Working Family Summit back in 2014, and recently been talking to a lot of CEOs. So with that back set, what do we know? So here's one way to look at just the evolution of working from home. It's one figure, and it's the percentage of full paid days that people are working from home. So why full days? Because it's relevant for commuting and it's relevant for office space. So many people work in the mornings and the evenings, but I'm only really going to focus on entire full days. So pre-COVID, working from home was incredibly rare. So in the US, only 15% of people ever worked from home, and that accounted for about 5% of days. So 1 in 20 days before COVID was work from home. During COVID, that surged. So it was highest during the first lockdown. It's kind of fallen a bit, but still it's roughly 50% of full paid days in the US, and in fact in Canada, UK, much of Northern Europe roughly are working from home. Where does that come from? It's worth thinking about that. So the US labor market is split basically into two groups. There are people pretty much like I'm guessing everyone listening to this, university educated managers or professionals who have been working from home full time during the pandemic. Then roughly the other half of the labor force tends to be lower paid, not entirely, but there tend to be lower paid people that have to come and work on the business premises. So think of people in retail, frontline, manufacturing, frontline health services, etc. These folks have, if they've been working on business premises throughout the pandemic, and they'll continue to do post-pandemic. In some ways, the most interesting point is here, post-COVID, what the firms tell us and what the individuals tell us is going to happen post-pandemic. So I'd say by now this thing is pretty clear. Just from these surveys, from talking to probably 200 plus organizations by now, that hybrid really seems to be the future. I would say 80% of organizations I talk to are talking about hybrid. This shows up here because the typical plan is, for example, what Apple announced, a 3-2 plan. So a very standard plan is you're going to come into the office 3 days a week. You're going to work from home 2 days a week. Let's say you come in Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, all the meetings, all the team events, all the presentations, all the kind of big, we need people physically there together, things happen on those days. Seems to be good for innovation, seems to be good for building culture. But on the other 2 days, let's say Wednesday, Friday, the quiet activities, the kind of things that are actually better done at home, reading reports, writing, preparing presentations. And given about half of us are currently working from home, those people are currently full-time working from home are looking at hybrid. And that's, there's 50% of them, they're going to spend about 2 out of 5 days a week. That's 40% of their time. That gives you 20% of total working days post-pandemic working from home. So we're going to go from kind of 5% before working from home to 50% now, back down to 20%. So a huge increase versus pre-pandemic, but a bit of a drop from where we were. So this hybrid plan is just, by now everyone's like sick and tired of hearing about this. So it's been announced by everyone. Here's Citigroup, here's Microsoft hybrid, here's Deutsche Bank announced hybrid, Here's Google announced hybrid. Google fantastically called it the 3-2-2 plan. I love the fact that they had to mention the final two as your weekend. You know, most people take it as given that you only work 5 days a week, but for Google, that wasn't so obvious, apparently. JP Morgan announced hybrid. Apple announced hybrid. I mean, this list just goes on and on. Salesforce, HSBC, there's just an endless laundry list of companies. You know, most interesting in some ways was Zoom. So Zoom gave its quarterly earnings a couple of weeks back, and Eric Yuan explicitly said, look, you know, for Zoom, we're aware that most of our customers are shifting to hybrid. That's still good for us because on those 2 days, there's going to be a lot of Zoom activity, and even on the in-office days, there's going to be some Zoom activity. So I would say the decision to go hybrid is kind of yesterday's or today's decision. Most people have made it. So I'm not going to focus so much on that decision. I'm going to take it as given. That's where you're heading, and talk about some of the trickier issues around how to run hybrid. So one is timing, when to do it. You know, this has come up a lot on a lot of execs. I'd say this is, you know, from research work now called Charter, but this is their data. It completely matches what I'm hearing in person from companies, which is Labor Day. So in the US, the majority of companies are saying, you know, we're having a lot of companies having a few people coming back now, like 10, 20, 1-2% of the workforce. But, you know, most companies I talk to are saying, we're going to try and return en masse, you know, for hybrid or whatever plan they have in Labor Day. We may take a couple of months to get it up. Why? Because vaccination rates should be pretty high by then. You know, schools are back, you know, universities are back, etc. I should point out that, you know, the risk is to the downside risk to delaying this. So I wouldn't be totally confident, but I think Labor Day is certainly the best bet, and it's what I would plan for. Then, you know, one question is choice. So there is, just to position this, there is a huge variation in what employees want. So this is in response to the question, in 2022 plus after COVID, how often would you like to have paid work days at home? And this is from, you know, by now 30,000 responses. I've seen this similar data for the UK, looks very similar. But basically 20% of people never want to work from home ever again. You know, they tend to be young, single or empty nesters. They, you know, they're lonely and isolated. They're fed up of being at home. 32% of people love working from home. And in fact, to the reverse, they never want to go back into the workplace. They want to stay forever at working from home. And then the rest, there's some mix in between. You know, that would be me personally. I'd probably want to work from home 2 days a week. Turns out that's roughly the average across the labor force, 2.5 days a week, probably going 3 days a week. But certainly you can see there's a huge range of, you know, choice of what people want, a huge range of what people want. So then the question is, how much should we allow employees choice? So again, I'm showing a chart from Reset Work or Charter, and you can see there's a big range of views on this. So to give you the three extremes, one is what I call fully decentralized. So every individual gets to decide how many days they work from home and which days. So, you know, I spoke to a senior exec in tech, and she said, look, you know, I treat my employees as adults, my team as adults. If they get their job done, if they're effective, they choose, you know, how many days and which days they work from home. If not, I'm going to haul them back into the office. But, you know, it's a free country. This is America. You know, if you're performing and delivering, you should get to choose. So that's one extreme. That's what is called full decentralized. There's a middle point, which is each team gets to choose, but within teams, everyone has to stick. So say if you're the industrial team, you say, you know, the team manager decides, talks to their members, and they decide, let's say we're going to do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We're going to work from home Monday, Friday. The commercial team decides something else, residential, etc. And then the final view is fully centralized. So the, you know, CEO, CHR, etc., the folks at the headquarters, the head of real estate maybe decides exactly which teams are going to work on which days, and everyone has to stick to that. So my view has changed. You know, this thing has become very contentious. I've written quite a few pieces in the Times and the Guardian. I speak a lot to Political Clark at the FT, who's written some fantastic stuff on this. I put something out in the Harvard Business Review about a couple of weeks ago that generated a tremendous controversy on this. I think it was maybe slightly more strongly worded than maybe my views are in terms of the title, but I generally used to be in favor of choice at the beginning of the pandemic and have changed my mind. And why don't I go through the three problems as I see it with letting individuals choose their work from home days? And, you know, I'll come back to discuss this in Q&A. So the first issue is mixed mode. So here are two stock photos, one from Google, bottom right, one from Logitech on the left. And this looks great in stock photos, but what you hear when you talk to companies is mixed mode is far from great. So the issue is, there are 6 of you on a Zoom or a Teams or whatever call you're using, 4 in the office, 2 at home. The 4 in the office are all in a conference room. They're all small heads on one screen, and the 2 at home are big heads. Worse still, the folks in the conference room appear to be occasionally having side conversations. You can't hear what's going on. You see whispering, people are turning, they're walking off. It's really problematic, and people at home on these mixed mode things complain that they feel left out. Now, companies recognize that, and they say, look, we've got a solution. What we're going to do is have everyone, whether you're at home or in the office, connect on your own laptop. And in fact, we're going to build little booths in the office for people to do that. So, immediately that begs the question, why would you come into the office just to spend much of your day in a booth on a screen? But, setting that aside, this solution is still not perfect, because we know what happens after the meetings, taken place. If it's contentious, the folks in the office all close their laptops, they stand up, they step out of the booths, and they start chatting. They maybe go grab a coffee. So the problem with having some people at home and some in the office is you get an in-group and an out-group, and it's almost impossible to fully deal with that. And already I just hear a lot of complaints about this. Second issue that Political Clerk wrote up about in the FT, and following that, to be honest, I ran the survey, which is maybe no one will be surprised about this, but we asked the question: if you got to choose to work from home for 2 days per week, which 2 days would you choose? When you teach MBAs, you don't show them the data, you get them to guess, but I'm sure everyone would have guessed this. Everyone basically wants to work from home Monday and Friday. So why is this a problem? Well, look at these numbers. Take the inverse of who wants to come into the office. 82% of people want to come into the office on Wednesday, but only 36% want to come in on Friday. What does that mean? Well, that means if you have enough office space and desks to seat everyone on a Wednesday, and you let people choose, you're going to have more than half your space empty on a Friday and about half of it empty on the Monday. So this is, tumbleweed blowing down the corridors on a Friday. This is an issue, A, because you're wasting office space, but B, we know still people are nervous about density. And if you want to de-densify the office, this is a pretty bad way of doing it. Wednesday is going to be crushed entryways and kitchens and elevators, and people may be uncomfortable. The final issue around choice is the impact on diversity. And to see this, I just want to show you 2 facts. As soon as you see this, it's kind of obvious where this leads. So fact 1 is who wants to work from home is not random. So again, the same question: how many days 2022 plus would you like to work from home? Here I'm showing you the data for those that have 1+ year of college. That's about 60% of the US labor force, and that have children under the age of 12 at home. It's about a third of that subgroup. And what you see amongst college educated people with young kids is, in that subgroup, women report wanting to work from home 5 days a week, almost 50% more than men. You can do other breakdowns. For example, people that are disabled tend to want to work from home more days because it's harder to commute. People that live further away, people that have lower income that don't have a car, et cetera, et cetera. So there's totally nothing wrong with this, and it makes complete sense. But it's worth noting that who wants to work from home on how many days a week is not random, and it's driven by kind of socioeconomic factors. Secondly, if you are working from home and your co-workers who you're being evaluated against are coming to the office, it can damage your promotions. And I have data on this from a paper I wrote in 2015, and I gave a TEDx talk on this, it seems like forever ago, like 2017, whereby we randomized volunteers to work from home in China. I won't give you the details, but basically half the people were randomized to work from home for 4 days a week, and the other half came into the office. Those that were randomly sent home for 4 days a week, after 21 months, their promotion rates were half those that remained in the office. So these groups are identical otherwise because they're randomized, except half of them work from home and their promotion rates half, which is a massive reduction. So if you put this together, you can see if you let people choose, there is a risk that 5-10 years down the line, single young men that live near the office come in every day, they get promoted up rapidly, they fill up all the management positions. People with young kids that live further away, maybe disabled, possibly more likely to be women, maybe tend to work from home more days and they get held back. And I think it's very damaging for diversity. It's also a huge, obviously, legal issue and not, managerial issue for firms. So I'll end to talk about the donut effect. It's, one of the other thing that's kind of interesting is what to do about your office space. So it's worth mentioning that this is data from Zillow. In the US, we've very clearly seen in large US cities, so this is for the 12 largest US cities, a big movement out from the city center out to the suburbs. So the central business district, the core of San Francisco, central Manhattan, bits of Brooklyn and New York, etc., have seen a large exodus out and out to the suburbs of the very same city. So why is that? Well, again, this is due to hybrid and working from home. If I'm going to work from home, let's say 2 days a week in future, I probably don't need to live as far to the city center because my commute is less of a pain. I'm only doing it 3 days a week, but I do need some space for the home office. So you see people are moving out in terms of property prices. I used the Freedom of Information Act with Arjun Ramani, my co-author, to get data from the US Postal Service. You actually see this in terms of change of address data. So roughly 15% of the population in US cities has left the city center in the last year. Roughly 15% of businesses have also left the city center in the last year on the right. So what does that mean for office space? Well, overall office space was soft. It's hardening up pretty rapidly now with the rebound. The reason in part is you may think that working from home would reduce the demand for office space. The other thing COVID has done is pushed down the demand for density. People want more space per person. They don't want crushed elevators and entryways. And net is actually meant the demand for office space has held up reasonably well. What we have seen is shorter leases. As this conference highlights that the future of work is incredibly uncertain, and so people are very nervous about signing long leases, so they're shortening. And the other thing I've seen is the demand for high rises has been hit. So on the bottom left is a picture from San Francisco. Things like Salesforce Tower are still very hard to use. We're beginning to fill up again, but you have the problem of mass transit. How do you get folks to the front door of high rises without, them being crushed in subways? How do you get them out to floor 50? Even, a number of vaccinated people in our survey are still nervous about extremely dense situations. And so companies are tending to push office-based demand out to industrial parks, to suburbs where you can drive and where it's lower density. With that, I'll stop. A lot of the data and the underlying research and blogs are at wfhresearch.com or at my website.
Nick, that was great. So among the key takeaways are people are happy working in the office 2 or 3 days a week. Just don't make it Friday, right? That's one of them. You made a specific point there, and as you noted, there has been some controversy around that point, which is an interesting thing, probably in the field of management academics. So some of your peers, including Katie Burke at HubSpot later, who's going to talk later today, Sidal Neely at Harvard, have really pushed back against this idea that there should be a centralized decision about when everybody on a team needs to actually come in the office. They said it undermines trust with workers. They have concerns about diversity because picking different days allows different groups of people to have more flexibility if they're caregivers or things like that. What's your response to that counter argument?
I mean, it's a trade-off. There's clearly a trade-off. So on the one side, choice is good in the sense people like choice, and you're true, you have more flexibility at home. I actually think the impact on diversity goes net the other way around, personally, but I mean, that's almost is an empirical question just from our survey data. So it's clear that if you let people choose, it's undeniable you have the office space issue. So you're obviously going to inefficiently use space. There's no way around that. Everyone wants to work from home Monday, Friday. It's pretty obvious why. On the other side, if you allow for choice, people like it. And this is why I was suggesting it last year. My, push against choice is really just from practically talking to firms and looking at the data. Intrinsically, I'm in favor of choice, but I think at this sense, the problem about the mixed mode, the problem about the diversity impact, and the problem on the office space, I think pushes against it. My guess practically is what's going to happen is, just to be clear, there's 3 levels. There's not just a choice, no choice. There's choice at the individual level, there's choice at the team level, and there's choice at the center. And it may be that a lot of firms settle at the team level. So the reason the team level is potentially a good solution is imagine I'm running the corporate team. What do? Imagine there's 10 people. I basically poll all my 10 team members and I say, hey, what do you guys want? I take that into account. I then say, I have a working view. It's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. I then talk to other teams that I may work with. If it turns out they're doing the same thing, we go for it. Now that, of course, avoids the mixed mode thing because everyone in my team is all coming on the same days. And importantly, they're all working at home. One of the things is to not allow backsliding because, of course, if I come in on those days, everyone else does. But so if the team decides that everyone's in and at home on the same day, so you avoid the problem with diversity and avoid the problem with mixed mode, you still have the inefficient use of space problem. It may be you just suck it up. I mean, that's what Apple has done. I was talking to Asana, the CEO of Asana, Dustin Hostowitz, a while, Dustin, and it may be you just decide, look, I care about team choice. I'm just going to have the office empty on Monday and Friday, and I'm just going to pay for a bit more real estate to make that possible. So I think it depends a bit on the business economics. The reason I've been against choice is I worry in the short run, a lot of firms will rush into that because it seems like the most appealing thing. And it's what I was supporting a year ago. From practical experience and looking at the data, I think there's some red flags around it, but it may still be worth going ahead. I counsel thinking hard about it because it's not some of the particularly the diversity issues or long run issues around promotion that will not immediately be obvious.
And to your point on real estate, actually, some of the recent data suggests that firms are backing off some of the extreme scenarios where they're going to shed a lot of real estate and actually looking at more moderate scenarios as they're kind of getting into this. We're getting some questions coming in from some attendees. I just wanted to ask you one or two quick questions before we go to those. One is, a big issue right now is retention. We've seen the data, they're a little bit all over the place, but something like 40% of employees are considering open to changing jobs, the data suggests. And is there, in terms of how managers navigate this return to workplace and decisions around centralized or hybrid, centralized or team-based approaches to hybrid schedules, is anyone you're talking with or in your own experience, is there any way to not, to sort of help yourself out on the question of retention as opposed to creating problems for yourself and alienating workers?
No, totally. So just in the last 6 months, this thing has radically changed. I'm sure everyone said, this is the fastest rebound of the labor market, US labor market, since records have begun. So yes, so one dimension I've seen this play out is firms are offering more days working from home. So quite a lot of firms I've spoken to have said, frankly, I'd rather people only work from home 1 day a week, but we've had to go for 2 because otherwise everyone's going to quit. So it's increasing number of days. And you're right, it may push things down from the center to the team. It's less obvious if you go from the team down to the individual, whether that helps or hinders retention. So if I'm in a team and each individual is allowed to choose which days they'll work from home, it's worth thinking through what's going to happen here because there's a bit of mixed mode. It's not such a nice workplace to be in. When I come in, half my colleagues are not there or some of them have chosen to have other days. The other issue is this rat race problem that is a real worry. So, Kevin, you and I are in the same team. I want to work from home 3 days a week. You're not working from home at all. What am I going to do? I may suddenly start to get stressed that you're going to get promotion and I'm not. So I start to come in. So, the team pushing choice below team level is extremely risky because people get terrified that, their young single co-worker is going to come in 5 days a week and scoop the promotion from them. And so you have to come in too. So yes, at the team base, it's definitely an issue. I think going below that actually may be a deterrent, if anything.
Yeah. Okay. I want to pull in some questions. And one question maybe we can get to is anybody figured out how to hold hybrid meetings? But first, this other question, this is from Susie Hamlin, who's joined us today. Do you see demonstrable trends by industry on who gets to decide the question? Are you seeing across the companies you're talking to, are there industry trends basically?
So so I tell you what I know and what I don't know. There are definitely industry trends in the level of working from home because of the nature of the role. So that's not surprising. But tech and with the exclusion of traders like Goldman's and people, but finance excluding investment banks. So retail finance tend to have more working from home because it's more managerial. Tech in particular, it's easier to have people work remote. In terms of choice, it is a total wild west. I mean, just to be clear, very few firms have articulated what their decision is going to be. I don't know how much people are following what's announced in the media, but few firms have actually announced the details. So there's all those screenshots I showed you, none of them announced whether it's choice or not. And they're opaque about how much it is team-based individual. So my prediction is what's going to happen is this is a revolution. There'll be an enormous amount of chopping and changing. So again, on that basis, I would be kind of cautious, the exact reverse of the Silicon Valley mantra, go fast, break things. I would go slowly and learn from other companies' mistakes. So, personally, I'll go for a safe, boring bet of hybrid, 3 at the work, 2 at home, probably, maybe at the team level, maybe at the headquarter level, decide it depends how crushingly important space is. And then you can relax.
You'd give them 2 weekend days too, I hope, like Google.
Yes, but just to be clear, if it turns out that somehow you think you've made a mistake, it's hard to wheel it in. So just imagine the reverse. You say, look, choose whatever days you want. And, Bob decides he's going to work from home 5 days a week and moves to Alaska. Good luck getting that person to come back in again. So, there is no perfect solution here, but I would certainly be cautious because this thing is so uncertain and there's not much precedent. I mean, no one really did hybrid before pandemic. There are a few, like GitHub, I saw you had them, which is great. I mean, there are a few firms, some of them I talked to that were fully remote, but hybrid was really rarest.
Yeah. So we've time for 1 or 2 other questions. And this one is the one I was hoping we'd get to. It's from Peter Knutson, and it's basically about the mixed mode that you can have in hybrid work scenarios, which is probably unavoidable in any scenario. We have some people in the office, some people out, you're doing meetings with people. Has anybody figured out how to hold a hybrid meeting that has all the advantages and none of the disadvantages of not having people in the same room?
Well, okay, so I'll tell you what we know from the survey data is small meetings up to 4 people are actually neutral on whether they're remote or in person. So some people prefer in person, some people prefer remote. Just to state the obvious, actually doing small meetings on remote is faster for logistics. You don't have to walk anywhere or go to a meeting room. And they tend to start and stop punctually because we're all in front of a clock. So for small meetings, actually, it's not obvious that it's much worse. The problem is the bigger meetings when there's 6, 8, 10 people. And there you have the problem of tiny heads. You have, people muting, unmuting, and it gets particularly hard with mixed mode. The one rule that I've heard that is a partial solution is what I would call the American in Europe solution, or the Brits in Europe, which is, I notice whenever I'm in, say, Germany, there's just me and 6 Germans. They'll all speak English, because I don't speak German. So it's kind of like that with mixed mode. I think if there's one person at home, you really want everyone, even in the office, to join from their own laptop. So it's a level playing field. And that, by the way, means there's a big implication for office redesign on many more cubicles. So the office of the future has a lot more tiny cubicles for people to connect in, either whether it's to people in the same office or another subsidiary, abroad in Mumbai or London. That's the best bet. Beyond that, it does get harder. The big issue you hear is people are nervous that the meeting ends. I, Nick, have said something that you, Kevin, are really upset about. The meeting ends and you go and, earhole the other 3 employees in the office because I'm at home and kind of, get one up on me. That's really hard to deal with, and there's no great solution for that.
Yeah, and you have to, I imagine, set company norms around that. You have to have people agree on that, but even then that's hard. We're going to wrap up in a second. I just want to ask you, kind of stepping back from this, if companies get this right, if they figure it out, is it better for workers in companies than the previous arrangements? Our assumption that pretty much everyone is on site. Like, can you imagine that people are happier, more productive, that workplaces are more dynamic and equitable in a hybrid than in a fully or mostly on-site situation?
So yeah, this kind of, it's a great question to end on. This kind of got lost in all the noise, is that obviously the pandemic has been truly awful. One of the few silver linings has been the shift towards more remote work. So our data suggests hybrid, 3 days a week in the office, say 2 at home, it increases productivity by probably 3 to 5%, because people are saving on, by the way, they save on the commute time, and roughly half of that they work in their current job. And it's quieter on the days at home. And individuals are dramatically happier. So the numbers suggest they see it as something like a 6 to 8% pay increase. So a hybrid is something you see both firms are better off because they're more productive, and individuals that are working are happier. On diversity, it's a bit less obvious. I think the most, the strongest argument on that is you can reach a wider pool of people in labor supply. So, before the pandemic, when I used to work and working from home, it was often seen as a way of getting in people that had other constraints. They were living far away, or maybe they had kids or relatives, or, they had various, or they were disabled, so that's helpful. If you've got to come in the office 3 days a week, that helps. Certainly if you're only going to come in 1 day a week. So, yes, that's also, I think, has moved in the right direction, but it's certainly the productivity and the satisfaction things are both dramatically improved. So I think on average, this has been one of the few net gains of the pandemic.
Great. Nick, we're going to end it there. This is great. I know we're all following your research, as you, and I'm sure you'll be tracking in the coming months as you have more examples of people adopting more fully hybrid arrangements. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.